since I did the old 99 Gamer sponsored videos, where I'd give a short demo of various Nintendo titles, I've wanted to put together some kind of series where I'd share Nintendo experiences that I felt weren't as common for most fans. I absolutely love the Extra Credits series, where they go through games that you might not have tried yet, and you can find a link to their full set of videos in the description, but I've always wanted to take my own shot at sharing some hidden gems within Nintendo's humongous library over the years. Today we're kicking off that series with underrated Nintendo games, where I go through a list of games that either didn't get crazy reception or didn't sell well at all, but I still think are worth exploring if you're looking for a new game to play outside of the norm. I'll be doing these videos separated by different systems, so I thought, what better way to start than with my personal favorite Nintendo console? The Nintendo DS. This thing's incredible combination of touchscreen and buttons made it an instant hit, and it was the best-selling line of handheld gaming consoles of all time. And with huge success came a huge library of games full of different genres and different developers. My goal today is to introduce you to some DS titles that you might fall in love with, but maybe the bad sales or poor word of mouth made them games that you've never heard about until today. Let's get on with the list. Zero Escape. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. Yeah, that title rolls right off the tongue, but 999 is honestly one of my favorite titles to come from the Nintendo DS, and right now is actually a really great time to try out the series. It's hard to describe this game, but the closest thing I can think of is an unholy union between the Saw horror movie series and Japanese visual novels. It's part book, part Myst-style first-person puzzle game, and the whole ordeal is surprisingly dark and nerve-wracking. 9 different participants are forced into a game of survival, trust, and cooperation, with the warning that a bomb in their chest will explode if they override any of the mysterious Game Master's rules. There are multiple endings, and there's a ton of mysteries to unravel. It's certainly not one for the squeamish, but it's an intriguing narrative that I highly recommend. The game also has a 3DS and Vita sequel, Virtue's Last Reward, and after years of speculation, after the author said he didn't have the funding for it, the third and final title of the Zero Escape series is about to drop in late June. A big reason I put this title here first is because of that sequel. If this premise sounds even slightly interesting to you, try out the first game ASAP, and you'll be right in time for the third game 2 months from now. Hotel Dusk, Room 215. If the violent 999 didn't sound up your alley, but you're still interested in the visual novel and puzzle-solving concept, Hotel Dusk is a fantastic alternative for the DS. You follow Kyle Hyde, an ex-detective on the lookout for his former partner, while also attempting to solve the mystery of the legendary Room 215, said to grant wishes. It takes the visual novel aspect literally. You hold your DS sideways like a book to play it. While the pacing is a little slower on this one, it has a great soundtrack and a unique use of rotoscoping in the art style that really bring you into the world. And while we're talking about underrated games, there are plenty of people that I've met that have enjoyed the first title and didn't even know that there was a sequel. It was only released in Europe because the developer went bankrupt before they could get the full release, but Last Window, The Secret of Cape West, is also worthwhile. Even though it's Europe only, the original DS games are thankfully not region-locked, and you can play it just fine on any system that plays DS games. Even the 3DS. Even though 3DS games are region-locked on the 3DS. But the DS games aren't. Why did they do this? Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. Closing out our little trio of text-heavy games is Ghost Trick, an often overlooked 3DS title from the mind of Shu Takumi, the creator of the Ace Attorney games. If you've ever wished that games like the Phoenix Wright titles had a little more moving gameplay to them, Ghost Trick is the title for you. You play as a spirit, and play with powers of possession and time travel to alter the fates of those around you, all while trying to find an answer to a pretty big mystery: your own death. Every character model contains multiple smooth animations that just ooze charm, and Missile the Pomeranian remains one of the cutest characters I've ever known. Unfortunately, Ghost Trick released really late into the lifespan of the DS, and it got buried by news surrounding the release of the 3DS just a month after it came out in the West. This title actually has an awesome port that you can play on iOS as well. The first 2 chapters of the iOS port are free, so I encourage checking out the demo and seeing if it's right for you. Radiant Historia. Moving on to a few of my favorite hidden gem RPGs on the system, Radiant Historia suffered the same fate as Ghost Trick, releasing really late into the system's lifespan in the West, and getting a pretty light amount of game shipments as a result. This Atlas game brought a ton of developers from the Megami Tensei staff, and they've really crafted an excellent RPG here. The game's main mechanic is time travel, and I know what you're thinking. I've heard this story before, but it definitely does play a bit different than the narrative of Chrono Trigger, focusing on the ability to move freely forward and backward between time and alternate histories to explore over 200 different narrative points. The combat is refreshing, with some fun twists like swapping whose turn it is and using a mini-grid to attack. And the politics-themed plot is surprisingly mature compared to most JRPGs of this style. Oh yeah, and Yoko Shimomura did the soundtrack. Seriously, just look at that resume. Infinite Space. This obscure RPG from Platinum Games is, at the very least, very appropriately named. It is by far one of the densest packages on the Nintendo DS. It's a space opera with huge inspiration in 80s anime, and my god, there's just so much to do. The game's combat revolves around giant spacecraft skirmishes, and while the main mechanic is built around rock, paper, scissors, there's a staggering amount of customization that goes into the ships themselves, from custom parts to designing a fleet, and recruiting and talking to individual crew members. It's downright intimidating how much there is to explore in this game, and if you're not a fan of multiple charts, stats, and menus, then I'd probably steer clear of this one. This game had a notoriously small shipment from Sega, making it one of the pricier titles on today's list at around $50 today. It might not be the most graphically pretty, but man, is it a wild ride once you lift off. Big Bang Mini. So far, most of the games we've covered are all about huge narratives, but if you want something a little simpler, Big Bang Mini is about as straightforward as it gets. It's a beautiful shoot-'em-up with fireworks. You dodge incoming fire while simultaneously launching colorful bursts onto the top screen from the bottom screen. It's your classic fever dream bullet hell, and while it's certainly fast and intense, it never reaches a point of frustration, making it the perfect feel-good game. It's simple, satisfying, and unlike the last title we covered, very cheap to find. This game launched at a budget price back in 2009, and you can find it used for well under $10 most places today. Donna and Elite Beat Agents. Nowadays, I feel like a sizable amount of people are somewhat aware of the PC rhythm game Osu, but fewer and fewer seem to realize that this fan game engine is based off of a handful of DS releases. In Japan, there are two titles, often abbreviated to their series name of Ouendan. They're rhythm games where you control a male cheerleading squad, dancing away to the game's classic formula of taps and slides the stylus to J-pop music. What truly makes these games are the in-game, manga-style scenarios that make up each song. If you perform well in the song, you'll help characters along the way in their daily lives. But if you fail, you'll have to watch your protagonist get wrecked. Between the first and second Ouendan games, we got Elite Beat Agents, a Western-style release, replacing the cheerleaders as secret agents and introducing all new songs and scenarios alongside a mix of English tracks. Surprisingly, it's just as good. I don't want to spoil all the fun, but here's just one scenario for you. Your song is Good Charlotte's The Anthem. Your scenario is helping a retired baseball player restore his former glory while fighting a lava golem at an amusement park. It is ridiculous, and somehow you'll still end up crying by the time you hit the Christmas episode. I recommend starting on EBA if you're an English user, but to be honest, you don't need to know a lot of Japanese to play and enjoy importing the region-free Ouendan games either. It's heartbreaking that these releases never sold extremely well, because they're my all-time favorite rhythm games. Electro Plankton. Remember that Smash Bros. Brawl stage that you unlocked and then immediately avoided? This is the game that stage came from, if you can even call it a game. Honestly, it's more of a creative tool than anything else, but man, something about this game puts me in the best mood. Tap on stuff to see what sounds they make. That's the entire game. It's like the equivalent of one of those baby toys meant to intellectually stimulate infants. But in a way, that's what Electro Plankton does. It takes you back to a simpler time and just allows you to explore your creative musical urges. It's not so much for making your own music either, although I have seen some amazing users do that as well, but more of a way to make your own wind chimes and relax. It's super experimental and ultimately not that deep at all, but I really wish there were more content like this game out there. Might and Magic: Clash of Heroes. Closing things out, I want to share two puzzle titles for the DS that I think are absolutely brilliant. The first is Might and Magic: Clash of Heroes, one of the modern spin-offs of the Might and Magic series that honestly feels nothing like the old JRPGs, but that doesn't stop this game from being one of the most compelling adventures I've had on the DS to date. It's a puzzle game at its core, but unlike most of the games of this nature, your puzzle swaps are slow and turn-based. It's an extremely tactical title full of little nuances, down to picking out your individual army, weapons, and leaders. The later maps really test your knowledge of the game mechanics, down to positioning and building walls, so if you're into a tactical challenge with an RPG flair, this is an awesome place to start. Also, while this game did start as an obscure little title on the Nintendo DS, the creators eventually ported this game to a ton of other places for everybody to enjoy, so you can also download and play this game in a ton of places from iOS to PC to the last generation of Xbox and PlayStation systems. Henry Hatsworth in The Puzzling Adventure. And finally closing out today's list is Henry freaking Hatsworth. From EA of all places comes one of the most shockingly good games I've ever encountered. On face value, this box art looks like one of those bargain bin games you find buried at a 2010 Walmart. Maybe it was. Actually, as far as I can research, I don't think this game sold well at all. But man, is it fun! You're basically Scrooge McDuck, an old man in search for rare golden items. But what makes this old-timer's adventure something to remember is the clever mechanic that utilizes both of the DS's screens. The top screen is an action platformer, complete with sword combos, gunshots, and a variety of other attacks. When enemies are defeated, their souls get trapped in the puzzle section of your bottom screen. If you don't clear them in the puzzle mode in time, they'll return from the grave to the top screen. There are a variety of power-ups between the top and bottom screens to help each side out, and bouncing between the two flows surprisingly well. Despite its cutesy style, the game actually gets pretty tough near the end, so it's a decent challenge as well if that's something that you're interested in. The game isn't especially long, but it's a neat little adventure that uses the DS really well, and I rarely hear from other players that they've had a chance to play this one yet. Thank you for giving today's new series a shot. There are a lot of fantastic titles that a lot of people consider underrated, stuff like The World Ends With You, but I really tried to dig for some obscure stuff that didn't happen to sell well at all, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this list and learned about a new game that you didn't know about before. If you end up trying any of these games and liking them, be sure to let me know over on Twitter at TheJWittz. I'll likely use Twitter to poll to determine which new console we do if we do another Underrated Games episode in the future. Enjoy the games, and I'll catch you guys next time with more Nintendo content.